Get your hands off me. Veronica Sinclair's voice echoed through the grand lobby of the Sinclair Regal, slicing through the murmur of guests and the clinking of expensive glassware. Two bulky security guards had her by the arms, dragging her toward the exit as though she were a trespasser, an intruder in a place she had built from the ground up. Guests in designer suits and elegant dresses stared in shock. Some watched with quiet curiosity, others clutched their phones, recording every second of the humiliating spectacle. I said, "Let me go." Veronica twisted her arms, her sharp heels skidding against the polished marble floor. The older of the two guards, a burly man with graying hair, sighed as if she were some unruly child. "Ma'am, I don't want to hurt you, but you need to leave now." Behind the front desk, Kyle, the smug-faced clerk, leaned against the counter with folded arms, watching her struggle with amusement. "This is a luxury hotel," he sneered. "We don't allow just anyone in here." Veronica's eyes blazed. Heat climbed up her neck, not from embarrassment, but from unfiltered rage. She squared her shoulders, pulling herself up to her full height despite the bruising grip on her arms. "You have no idea what you've just done," she said, her voice eerily calm. Kyle scoffed. "Oh, I think I do. You're just another scammer trying to get a free night in a place you can't afford." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests glanced at each other uncomfortably. Others kept recording, sensing something bigger unfolding. Veronica inhaled deeply, exhaling slowly, her pulse thrumming in her ears. Then she spoke the words that made the room go silent. "I am Veronica Sinclair." She let the name hang in the air, then added, "The CEO, the owner of this hotel." Kyle's smirk vanished in an instant. His arms unfolded. His throat bobbed in a hard swallow. The guards froze. One let go of her arm as though burned, realization dawning like a cruel joke. A sharp gasp echoed from somewhere in the lobby. "Wait! Stop!" A frantic voice cut through the stunned silence. The assistant manager, a short woman with tight blonde curls, came barreling across the floor, her face ghost white. "We've made a terrible mistake," she practically screamed. Her eyes darted from the guards to Veronica, her hands shaking as they clasped together in sheer panic. Kyle stumbled back, knocking over a stack of room keycards. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Veronica stood there, arms free now, letting the weight of her identity sink in. But this wasn't over. Not even close. 5 hours earlier, Veronica stepped out of her sleek black Bentley, heels clicking against the pavement as she approached the grand entrance of the Sinclair Regal. She had been away for months, tied up in board meetings, acquisitions, and overseeing new properties. But tonight, she wanted nothing more than to enjoy the crown jewel of her empire. The penthouse suite had been designed by her, for her, a sanctuary in the midst of chaos. And tonight, it was hers to unwind in. She didn't bother calling ahead. Why would she? This was her domain. As she entered the lobby, she took a slow breath, admiring the familiar opulence. Chandeliers sparkled like diamonds overhead. The scent of fresh lilies filled the air. It was perfect, or so she thought. She approached the check-in desk, where a young man in a pressed suit barely looked up from his screen. Kyle. She didn't recognize him, but she knew his type. The dismissive glance. The half-hearted customer service tone. "Can I help you?" he asked, still not meeting her gaze. "Yes," she said smoothly. "I have a reservation under Veronica Sinclair." Kyle's fingers tapped lazily on the keyboard. He barely glanced at the screen before shaking his head. "Sorry, ma'am. I don't see a reservation under that name." Veronica arched a brow. "Check again." He sighed dramatically, typing something else. Another glance. Then another shake of his head. "Nope. Not here. Maybe you're at the wrong hotel." Her fingers curled against the counter. She kept her expression neutral, but inside something burned. "I am exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said. Kyle's lips twitched. That smirk. That infuriating smirk. "I don't know what to tell you," he said. "But without a valid reservation, I can't let you stay here." Veronica took a slow, deliberate breath. "Kyle, was it?" she asked, eyeing his name tag. "I suggest you take a closer look. Because if you don't, you're going to regret it." Kyle let out a short laugh. "Oh, I highly doubt that." He turned, raising a hand toward security. "I think we have someone causing a disturbance here." And just like that, the nightmare had begun. Back to the present. The weight of what had happened settled over the lobby like a thick fog. Veronica tilted her head, arms now crossed, watching as Kyle's face turned a deeper shade of red. "You're the CEO," he stammered. His hands trembled as he adjusted his tie. "I own this hotel," she repeated, stepping closer. "I built it. I signed your paychecks. I made this empire." Kyle's Adam's apple bobbed. His eyes darted to the assistant manager, desperate for a lifeline. But there was none. The security guards looked like they wanted to melt into the floor. The watching crowd had turned from passive spectators to silent judges. Their eyes held the weight of what Kyle and the guards had done. The assistant manager took another shaky step forward. "Ms. Sinclair, I can't even begin to." "Save it," Veronica snapped. Kyle opened his mouth, but before he could spew whatever weak excuse he was about to conjure, Veronica pulled out her phone and dialed. It rang once, twice, then, "Richard," she said crisply, addressing her head of operations. "Get down here. Now." Kyle paled further. The guard stiffened. And Veronica? She just smiled, because this was far from over. Richard arrived within minutes, his sharp gray suit contrasting against the chaos in the lobby. The moment he stepped inside, his eyes darted to Veronica, then to Kyle, who was now visibly trembling. Richard had worked with Veronica for years. He knew the look on her face meant trouble for someone. "Ms. Sinclair," he greeted, his tone respectful yet firm. "I came as soon as I got your call." The entire room was still, the tension thick enough to suffocate. Kyle, the assistant manager, and the security guards all looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Veronica folded her arms. "Richard, kindly explain to Mr. Kyle here exactly who I am." Richard turned slowly, his eyes narrowing on Kyle, who was now drenched in sweat. "This is Veronica Sinclair," he said, each word deliberate. "She's not just the CEO. She's the owner of Sinclair Regal. Every inch of this hotel exists because of her." Kyle let out a choked breath, his confidence from earlier now completely shattered. I didn't know." "You didn't bother to know," Veronica cut him off. "You saw a black woman in designer heels and assumed I didn't belong. You humiliated me in my own hotel." The assistant manager took a step forward, her hands shaking. "Ms. Sinclair, I don't," Veronica snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through glass. "The only thing I want to hear from you is why I shouldn't fire every single person who stood by and let this happen." Kyle was practically hyperventilating now. He fumbled for words. "Ms. Sinclair, please, this was a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Veronica let out a cold laugh. "You had security drag me across the lobby. You embarrassed me in front of my guests. And now you want to call it a misunderstanding?" I just thought," Kyle stammered, but Veronica raised a hand, silencing him instantly. "Richard," she said, shifting her gaze. "What do you think? Should I have security throw him out like he did to me?" Kyle's face turned ashen. "Please, Miss Sinclair, I need this job." Oh, now you need something from me?" Veronica arched a brow. "Funny how that works." The assistant manager wiped her palms against her skirt. "Miss Sinclair, I know this was wrong, but you stood there and let it happen," Veronica finished for her. "You watched as your employee humiliated the owner of this establishment and did nothing to stop it." The guests had stopped pretending they weren't paying attention. Some whispered amongst themselves, others kept filming, knowing that they were witnessing something big. Veronica took a step toward Kyle. "You assumed I didn't belong. You assumed you had the power to remove me. But now that you know who I am, you're suddenly sorry?" Kyle swallowed hard. I made a mistake. "A mistake that you should pay for," Veronica said icily. "Not me." Kyle's lips trembled. "Please, Miss Sinclair, I have a family. I can't afford to lose this job." Veronica studied him for a long moment. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the fear of consequences he never expected to face. She let the silence hang before finally saying, "I'll deal with you later." Kyle sagged with relief, but it was short-lived when Veronica turned to Richard. "I want a full report on every guest who has ever filed a discrimination complaint here." Richard nodded. "Understood." Veronica's gaze flicked back to Kyle. "Because if this is how you treat the owner, I can only imagine how you've treated paying guests who didn't fit your image of who belongs here." The weight of her words sent a ripple of unease through the staff. The assistant manager looked like she might faint. Veronica turned away from them, her composure unshaken, her control absolute. "Oh, and Kyle." "Yes, ma'am," he squeaked. Her lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "Get comfortable, because when I'm done, you're going to know exactly what it feels like to be publicly humiliated." The color drained from his face. Before anyone could respond, a voice came from the entrance. "Miss Sinclair." A tall, older man in a suit strode inside, flanked by two people in expensive business attire. The moment Kyle saw him, his face twisted in sheer horror. It was Mr. Davenport, the regional investor responsible for funding the expansion of Sinclair Regal. And he looked furious. "Ms. Sinclair, I just received a call about this." He gestured around at the onlookers, the recording phones, the chaos still lingering in the air. What the hell is going on? Kyle took a shaky step back, his entire body trembling now. Veronica didn't even flinch. Instead, she slowly turned to face Davenport, her confidence unwavering. "I was denied a room in my own hotel," she said coolly. "And now we're going to discuss what happens next." Davenport's gaze flicked from her to Kyle, his nostrils flaring as realization dawned. Kyle looked like he wanted to disappear into thin air. "And Veronica?" She smiled, because she wasn't done yet. Davenport's eyes flickered between Veronica and Kyle, his expression darkening with every passing second. The weight of what had happened, what it meant for the hotel's reputation, was sinking in fast. The murmurs of guests, the flashing phone cameras, the burning humiliation on Kyle's face. This was already out of control. "Ms. Sinclair," Davenport said, his voice tight with restrained anger. "Perhaps we should speak in private." "Oh no," Veronica cut him off, her tone calm but firm. "This conversation stays right here." Kyle swallowed hard, his entire body trembling. He looked at Davenport as if silently begging for a lifeline, but there was none. The regional investor's face was twisted in frustration. "Ms. Sinclair, I understand that there has been a grave mistake here." "A grave mistake?" Veronica's eyebrows shot up. "I was thrown out of my own hotel, humiliated in front of guests, and treated like I was trespassing." "That's not a mistake, Mr. Davenport. That's a mindset." Davenport let out a sharp breath, struggling to keep his composure. "I assure you, this will be handled." "Oh, I know it will," Veronica said smoothly. "Because I'm handling it myself." Kyle's knees nearly buckled. "Please, Miss Sinclair, Veronica ignored him and turned back to Davenport. "And while we're discussing handling things, let's talk about the upcoming Investors Gala. The one where we're supposed to showcase Sinclair Regal's flawless hospitality." Davenport's jaw clenched. The Investors Gala was set to bring in millions in additional funding. If word got out about this incident, it could be catastrophic for the hotel chain's reputation. "I assume you can imagine how much the investors will love hearing about this," Veronica continued, gesturing around the lobby. "They'll be thrilled to know that we treat our own CEO like she doesn't belong." Kyle let out a choked whimper, finally realizing how deep of a hole he had dug. Davenport's face turned red. "Ms. Sinclair, I urge you to reconsider making this a public issue. We can find a way to resolve this internally." Veronica tilted her head slightly. "Oh, you're worried about your reputation now?" Davenport gritted his teeth. "I'm worried about the company." Veronica chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. "Funny, because you weren't worried about it when your employees were dragging me out of my hotel." Kyle took a step forward, desperation seeping through his every word. "Ms. Sinclair, I will do anything to fix this." Veronica's gaze snapped to him. "Anything?" He nodded vigorously. "Yes, anything." Her lips curled into a slow, deliberate smirk. "Perfect." The lobby fell silent. Even Davenport looked uneasy. "I want you to stand right here, in front of every single guest and staff member," Veronica said, her voice steady, "and explain exactly what you did tonight. Loud enough for the cameras to catch every word." Kyle's eyes widened in sheer terror. Aye. "Oh, is public humiliation only acceptable when you're the one dishing it out?" Veronica leaned in just slightly, her presence overpowering. "Go ahead, Kyle. Show us that you really mean your apology." Kyle's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Sweat dripped down his forehead. The realization hit. There was no escaping this. Either he complied, or his entire career crumbled before his eyes. Davenport shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Sinclair, is this really necessary?" Veronica didn't even glance at him. "You tell me, would a simple apology have been enough if I were just another black guest that your staff decided didn't belong?" Davenport said nothing. He knew the answer. Everyone in the lobby did. Kyle inhaled shakily, then turned toward the guests, staff, and rolling cameras. His voice was barely above a whisper. I wrongly assumed Miss Sinclair didn't belong here. I treated her unfairly. I had her removed without reason. He squeezed his eyes shut, humiliation washing over him. "I was wrong." Veronica's expression remained unreadable. "Louder." Kyle's jaw trembled. "I was wrong." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The power shift was undeniable. Veronica had taken back everything that had been stripped from her, and now Kyle was the one left exposed. Davenport cleared his throat, shifting nervously. "Ms. Sinclair, I believe this has been handled sufficiently." "Oh, we're just getting started," Veronica said smoothly. "Because next, we're going to review every discrimination complaint that's ever been filed in this hotel." Davenport stiffened. You can't be serious." Veronica smiled. "Oh, but I am." She turned to Richard. "Set up a full audit of employee conduct. I want every single case of racial discrimination documented. If there's a pattern, I want names." Richard nodded. "Consider it done." Davenport looked like he was barely holding himself together. "Ms. Sinclair, let's discuss this privately. Surely we can reach a reasonable compromise." Veronica folded her arms. "There's no compromise when it comes to people's dignity." Kyle's face was ghostly pale. He knew this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about the entire system that allowed this behavior to exist unchecked. And then, just when the tension couldn't get any higher, the front doors burst open. A woman in a navy blue power suit stormed in, her heels clicking aggressively against the marble floor. Two men in black suits flanked her, their expressions stone cold. Davenport went rigid. "Oh no!" Kyle's breath hitched. The assistant manager gasped. Veronica turned slowly, her eyes locking onto the woman who had just entered. And then she smirked. Well, Veronica murmured. "Looks like corporate finally decided to show up." The woman's gaze was sharp, unforgiving. "Ms. Sinclair, I'm Jacqueline Reese, Senior Executive Director of Sinclair Regal." Her next words made Kyle's knees buckle. "And I'm here to clean house." The moment Jacqueline Reese uttered those words, a hush fell over the lobby. The weight of her presence was palpable, her sharp gaze cutting through the tension like a blade. Kyle's breath stuttered, his legs barely able to hold him upright. Davenport swallowed hard, his usually commanding presence now reduced to silence. Veronica didn't flinch. She held Jacqueline's gaze, her lips curving into a slow, knowing smile. "Clean house, huh?" she mused, folding her arms across her chest. "About time." Jacqueline took a step forward, her heels clicking ominously against the marble floor. "Ms. Sinclair, I assure you, I am well aware of the severity of this situation." She turned to Davenport, her expression unreadable. "And I intend to handle it accordingly." Davenport stiffened. "Ms. Reese, I can personally assure you that this was all a misunderstanding." Jacqueline held up a single manicured finger, silencing him instantly. "Save it," she said coolly. "We've had enough misunderstandings at Sinclair Regal. Now we deal with accountability." Kyle let out a choked breath, his eyes darting between Veronica and Jacqueline. "Ms. Reese, please, I can explain." Jacqueline turned her gaze on him, and for a moment, the entire lobby seemed to shrink. "Oh, you'll explain," she said, her voice laced with quiet authority. "In fact, you'll do a lot more than that." Kyle's face went deathly pale. Veronica arched a brow. "So, Jacqueline, how exactly do you plan on cleaning house?" Jacqueline didn't miss a beat. "First, we start with the individuals responsible." She motioned toward Kyle. "Kyle Reynolds, effective immediately, you are placed on indefinite administrative leave pending a full internal investigation." A collective gasp swept through the onlookers. Kyle's mouth fell open. Aye. Security." Jacqueline barely lifted a hand before two uniformed security officers stepped forward. "Escort Mr. Reynolds off the premises." Kyle staggered backward. "Wait. No, please, Ms. Reese, Save it." Jacqueline's voice was unyielding. "You humiliated the CEO of this hotel and her own establishment. If you think you'll walk away from this unscathed, you're delusional." Kyle turned frantically to Davenport. "Mr. Davenport, please help me." Davenport, however, was now visibly sweating, his own career hanging by a thread. He didn't move. Didn't even look at Kyle. Security grabbed Kyle by the arm. He struggled briefly before realizing resistance was useless. His voice cracked as they pulled him toward the exit. "Please, I can fix this. Just give me a chance." The heavy doors shut behind him. Silence. Veronica exhaled slowly, shaking her head. "That's one." Jacqueline's eyes slid to Davenport. "Now, as for you." Davenport paled. "Jacqueline, let's be reasonable." "Reasonable?" Jacqueline scoffed. Was it reasonable to allow an employee to throw out the CEO based on nothing but his own prejudice? Was it reasonable to stand by and do nothing while your staff degraded the very person responsible for this hotel's success? Davenport's mouth opened, but no words came out. Jacqueline's expression remained cold. Veronica, what's your call? All eyes turned to Veronica. She held Davenport's gaze for a long moment, then sighed. Davenport, you've been here a long time. He nodded eagerly. Yes, I have. I built this hotel from the ground up, And that's exactly why you should have known better. Veronica's voice was calm, but there was an undeniable finality to it. Instead, you allowed this culture to fester under your leadership. Davenport's face crumpled. Please, Veronica, She shook her head. You're done here. Jacqueline nodded at security. Escort Mr. Davenport out as well. The color drained from Davenport's face. He didn't fight it as security approached him. His movements were sluggish, his eyes blank with disbelief. As they led him away, the realization settled in. His reign was over. The tension in the lobby remained thick, but there was something else now, a shift in energy. A recognition that something monumental was happening. Jacqueline adjusted the cuff of her suit. Now that the immediate issues have been handled, we move on to the next step. Veronica crossed her arms. Which is? Jacqueline's expression darkened. Digging deeper. Veronica tilted her head. How deep? Jacqueline met her gaze. Deep enough to find out just how many more of these misunderstandings have been swept under the rug. A murmur swept through the employees. Some shifted uncomfortably, while others, particularly the black staff, looked hopeful. Jacqueline glanced at Richard. I need a full report. Any complaints of racial discrimination, microaggressions, unfair terminations. I want everything. Richard nodded. Already on it. Veronica exhaled, a flicker of satisfaction crossing her face. This was the change she had been waiting for. But just as the moment settled, one of the receptionists, an older black woman, cleared her throat hesitantly. Miss Sinclair? Veronica turned to her. Yes. The woman glanced around nervously before stepping forward. If you're serious about digging deeper, then there's something you need to know. Veronica's brows furrowed. Go on. The woman cast a wary glance at the remaining staff. Then she lowered her voice. This goes beyond just discrimination. There's something else happening here. Something bigger. Veronica's stomach tightened. Jacqueline's gaze sharpened. Richard stopped typing. Veronica took a slow step forward. What are you talking about? The receptionist hesitated before leaning in slightly. And when she finally spoke, her words sent an icy chill through the air. There's money missing, Miss Sinclair. A lot of it. Veronica's pulse pounded in her ears. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. There's money missing. A lot of it. Jacqueline's eyes flickered with sharp calculation. How much are we talking? The receptionist glanced around nervously, then lowered her voice. Millions. A hush swept through the remaining staff. Veronica's grip on the marble counter tightened. This wasn't just about racial discrimination or prejudice. It was corruption. Jacqueline exhaled sharply, her mind already racing through the implications. Who's involved? The receptionist hesitated before glancing toward the now empty spot where Davenport had stood moments ago. I don't have solid proof, but he always seemed to be at the center of it. Shady invoices. Unexplained write-offs. Bonuses that didn't make sense. But he's not the only one. Veronica and Jacqueline exchanged a look. Davenport was already out, but if this ran deeper, they needed to move fast. Jacqueline straightened. I want records. Financial reports. Anything that shows irregularities. Richard stepped forward, already scrolling through his tablet. I have limited access from here, but I can get more if I log in remotely. Veronica turned to the receptionist. You said there were others. Who? The woman hesitated before sighing. I don't know names, but there were whispers about the investors. Some of them. Money shifting hands where it shouldn't. Jacqueline's jaw clenched. If investors were involved, this could go even higher than she expected. We need to dig now. Richard nodded. I'll need to get to my office. Veronica gestured toward the elevators. Let's move. As they strode toward the private executive offices, tension crackled between them. This wasn't just a rogue manager's misstep. This was a financial scandal. The moment they stepped into Richard's office, he locked the door and pulled up the hotel's encrypted database. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Give me a second, accessing Davenport's financial records. His brows furrowed. Damn. He covered his tracks well. But he clicked through files. Wait, what's this? Veronica leaned over his shoulder, her eyes scanning the numbers. A wire transfer? Jacqueline's gaze darkened. Who's the recipient? Richard clicked a few more times. Then he froze. Oh hell. Jacqueline and Veronica exchanged glances. What? Veronica demanded. Richard turned the screen toward them. The name attached to the transaction made Veronica's blood run cold. It was someone they never expected. Veronica's breath hitched as she stared at the name on the screen. Jacqueline's jaw tightened. The recipient of the wire transfer wasn't just some random offshore account or a shadowy third party. It was someone who should have been beyond reproach. One of the hotel's top investors. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation pressing down on them. Veronica's mind raced. This wasn't just about Davenport. This was bigger, deeper. The corruption had wormed its way into the very foundation of her business. Jacqueline's voice was cold, sharp. We have everything we need. It's time to act. Richard nodded, already forwarding the files to a secured cloud drive. I'm making sure there's no way they can erase this. Veronica exhaled, steadying herself. I want an emergency board meeting. Tonight. The receptionist, still lingering by the door, spoke up hesitantly. Miss Sinclair, if I may. The investor, he's already here. Veronica's eyes narrowed. Where? Penthouse suite. He checked in this morning. A slow smile curved Jacqueline's lips. Perfect. Without another word, Veronica turned on her heel and marched toward the elevator. Jacqueline and Richard flanked her, their pace steady and unrelenting. The tension was electric. Every step felt like marching toward war. The ride up was silent, save for the soft chime of the floors ticking by. When the doors slid open, Veronica strode down the hallway, stopping in front of the double doors of the penthouse. She didn't knock. She walked in. Inside, the man in question sat comfortably in an opulent leather chair, a glass of bourbon in his hand. He looked up, unfazed by their entrance. Ah, Veronica, he greeted smoothly, swirling his drink. I heard there was a bit of a commotion downstairs. Hope it wasn't anything too serious. She didn't bother with pleasantries. You've been stealing from me. The investor chuckled, setting his drink down. Stealing? My dear, business is just a game of numbers. Jacqueline stepped forward, placing a tablet on the glass coffee table between them. Then let's talk numbers. The screen lit up with the evidence, bank transfers, falsified contracts, and direct proof linking him to the embezzlement. His smirk faltered. Veronica crossed her arms. You thought you could get away with it. That I wouldn't notice. The investor leaned back, exhaling heavily. And what now? You go public? That would destroy your hotel's reputation, just as much as mine. Veronica smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, I don't need to go public. She gestured toward the door. You see, I have a room full of board members waiting downstairs. And when I walk in there, I'm bringing this with me. Jacqueline smirked. You won't just lose your shares. You'll lose everything. The investor's face paled. You wouldn't. Veronica leaned in, her voice a whisper of steel. Watch me. Silence stretched between them. Then, with a resigned sigh, the investor rubbed his temple. What do you want? Veronica straightened, radiating authority. Your immediate resignation. Full return of the stolen funds. And a public statement clearing my name. The investor swallowed hard. Fine. She nodded. And you have until sunrise. He didn't argue. The next morning, the headlines exploded. Powerful investor steps down amidst financial scandal. Black CEO exposes corruption in own hotel. As Veronica stood in the grand lobby, watching the story unfold across multiple news stations, Jacqueline clinked a glass of champagne against hers. You did it. Veronica exhaled, allowing herself a small smile. No, we did it. A group of employees walked past, whispering excitedly, their admiration evident. The energy in the hotel had shifted. She wasn't just their CEO. She was their leader. Jacqueline raised a brow. And what now? Veronica took a slow sip of her drink, then set it down with purpose. Now, we rebuild. We rise. And we make damn sure this never happens again. As she turned, the camera crews outside catching glimpses of her triumphant stance. The world was forced to take notice. Because she wasn't just the Black CEO who had been denied a room in her own hotel. She was the Black CEO who made them regret it instantly. If you love this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. What would you have done in Veronica's place? Drop your thoughts below. We'd love to hear from you.